As the saying goes, history was written by the winners. And being that, for the last couple of centuries, at least, large portions of the world have been dominated by people with a primarily heterosexual point of view, some very interesting and important figures have had their history altered, omitted, or just plain ignored. But since this is the month dedicated to celebrating the cornucopia of diversity that makes humanity great, I thought it'd be a good idea to discuss some of these people and the impact they've had on the world. While I was originally going to talk about just one of these lovely ladies, during my research, I was struck by just how similar they were. Both women came from well-off aristocratic families, were well-educated at a point in time when most women weren't, and left behind writing attesting to their love of women. Sappho was born on the island of Lesbos during the 6th century BCE. While little is known about her life and family, other than the identity of 3 of her brothers, and a possible family connection to the wine industry, Sappho's main claim to fame is her poetry, which primarily focuses on feelings of love and affection toward women. Sappho's poetry was unusual for the time, as it focused on the feelings associated with falling in love, as well as the pain and heartbreak of unrequited affection. He seems to me to be equal to the gods. Whoever sits opposite you and listens to you talking sweetly and laughing desirably, which makes the heart in my breast fly. For whenever I look upon you for an instant, I can no longer find a single word. While Sappho's poetry has earned her a reputation as a lesbian and gay icon, in reality, Sappho's sexuality is still a subject of debate, due largely to the fact that only 650 lines of her poetry have survived into the modern era. Though records from the Library of Alexandria reference the complete collection of Sappho's work, amounting to a total of 9 volumes, over the centuries, Sappho's poetry began to fall out of favor. While the subject matter of Sappho's poems undoubtedly rubs some people the wrong way, for example, there is some evidence that Pope Gregory VII ordered her work burned in 1073 CE, the ultimate nail in Sappho's coffin was her use of Aeolic Greek, a form of the language that proved difficult for later writers to translate. While the lack of source material has made it difficult for scholars to make a definitive statement regarding Sappho's sexuality, this fact has had absolutely no effect on Sappho's identity as a lesbian icon. Nor should it. Part of what makes Sappho's poetry so appealing is that it focuses on emotions like love, loneliness, and heartbreak, things that everyone can relate to and understand. Meaning that if we can take away anything from Sappho's poetry, it's that love is something that we can all understand and appreciate, no matter the circumstance. Born in the English town of York in 1791, Anne Lister, not unlike Sappho, left behind writing documenting her love of the fairer sex. Starting at the age of 15, Lister began meticulously documenting her life and love affairs in a series of diaries, culminating in over 7,000 pages and 26 volumes of text. Though Lister was aware of the negative repercussions that her relationships could have on her life, family, and title, opting to record the more sultry portions of her diary in code, the reality of her situation had little effect on her love life, which she conducted without shame under the belief that her love of the fairer sex was a gift from God. Lister was equally nonconformist when it came to her fashion choices, as she decided to abandon typical feminine attire in favor of long black coats, thick boots, and hats, which she wore in place of a bonnet. This unique style of dress made her look almost androgynous in appearance, a fact which Lister herself commented on. "My manners are certainly peculiar, not all masculine, but rather softly gentlemanlike." Lister's deep love for women culminated in a series of passionate love affairs that ended only after her marriage to Anne Walker in 1834. Though their marriage ceremony was not legally binding, Lister and Walker lived together as a married couple at Lister's family estate, Shibden Hall. Unfortunately, the couple's marriage did not last long, as, while traveling through the country of Georgia, Lister fell victim to an insect bite and died on September 22, 1840. Walker accompanied Lister's body back to England and returned to Shibden Hall until 1844, when her brother-in-law, George Sutherland, had her committed to an asylum before taking up residency at Shibden Hall with his family. While the reason for Anne Walker's admittance to the asylum is unknown, her stay there was not permanent, as the 1851 census records her place of residence as Cliff Hill, one of her family's many properties. Walker resided at Cliff Hill until her death in 1854, at which point Shibden Hall passed back into the Lister family. A somber end to one of history's most well-known same-sex couples. The Buddhist monk Kobodaishi, better known as Kukai, is an important figure in Japanese history, credited as the founder of the True Way school of esoteric Buddhism and the possible inventor of kana script. He's also known as the man who brought homosexuality to Japan. According to legend, while studying Buddhism in China, Kukai was introduced to the tradition of monastic homosexuality, which he brought back to Japan. While this legend is problematic for a number of reasons, the most notable being that homosexuality is a fact of nature rather than an introduced trait, it's true that some of the earliest records of homosexuality in Japan come from Buddhist temples. While some schools of Buddhist thought believe that enlightenment can only be obtained through the rejection of earthly pleasures and the material world, other schools are less opposed to the act of coitus. This more accepting attitude towards coitus, combined with the exclusively male atmosphere of monasteries, led to the development of a homosexual tradition within some Buddhist monasteries. Now, unlike the ancient Greek tradition of pederasty, these relationships were age-structured, and often took place between a monk and his acolyte or chigo, an adolescent boy sent to the temple to receive an education, an act now referred to as pedophilia, which is very, very illegal. This sentiment was not shared by the people of pre-modern Japan, however, as art and literature of the medieval period, such as the Acolyte picture scroll, acknowledged monastic homosexuality as an accepted tradition. Monastic homosexuality may have also influenced the development of homosexual traditions within the samurai class. Yes, you heard right, homosexual samurai were indeed a thing. Homosexual relationships among members of the samurai class were based around age and rank, often taking place between a lord and his vassal or a samurai and his attendant. While the lord-vassal relationship was based on unwavering devotion and loyalty, the depths of this connection ranged from a willingness to follow orders on the part of the vassal to a genuinely passionate devotion, the latter of which occasionally resulted in the development of a romantic or sexual relationship between the two. Relationships between samurai and their attendants, or wakashu, were generally viewed as mutually beneficial for both parties. The wakashu, who generally ranged in age from 15 to 19 years old, would be assigned to a veteran samurai who would instruct them in the ways of the warrior, while the wakashu, for his part, would be expected to exemplify the role of the receptive and attentive student, even in relation to his teacher's physical needs. While this relationship may seem strange based on our modern perspective, most of the literature and art of the Edo period depict the samurai-wakashu relationship in a positive light, and in some cases, the connection between a samurai and his wakashu remained strong even after the latter became a samurai. Unfortunately, by the time of the Meiji Restoration, attitudes towards homosexuality in Japan began to change. Western influence, along with the collapse of Japan's feudal structure, culminated in changing attitudes towards homosexuality. Today, the rights of LGBTQ people in Japan are incredibly limited. especially when compared to other first world countries. Same-sex couples in Japan cannot inherit their partner's house or property, get married, or obtain parental rights to children. Though it does seem like things are starting to change. Recent developments, such as the Sapporo District Court's ruling that the government's ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional, shows that Japan is at least starting to move in the right direction. The life story of Charles Dion reads a lot like an 18th century adventure novel. Born to an aristocratic family in the town of Tonnerre in 1728, Dion joined the army and traveled to Russia in 1756. Served as secretary to the French ambassador to Russia from 1757 to 1760 before being appointed captain of the dragoons and fighting in the 7 Years' War against England in 1761. After helping to negotiate the Peace of Paris in 1762, Dion then spent some time at the court of England, acting as a spy and informant to King Louis XV. However, during this time, rumors about Dion's gender began to circulate, and in the 1770s, he shocked everyone by revealing that he was actually a woman, claiming that they had been born female, but had been raised as a boy because their father could not inherit the family estate without a male heir. Ah, the joys of patriarchy. But life as a woman in the 18th century was not easy, and after trying and failing to re-enlist in the French army, Dion began a career as a professional fencer, in an attempt to make ends meet after their pension was suspended in 1789. Unfortunately, an injury forced Dion to retire from fencing in 1796, and from this point onward, their life became a downward spiral of loss and poverty. Dion died virtually penniless in 1810, at which point a team of doctors, who apparently could not contain their curiosity regarding the state of Dion's nether regions, performed a physical examination on their corpse, revealing that they were in fact biologically male. While people today would probably identify Dion as transgender, the problems associated with labeling a historical figure using terms invented in the 20th century are many. And in an attempt to avoid that particular pitfall, I decided to refer to Dion using they/them pronouns, rather than he or she. This being said, Dion's choice to live as a woman during a time when women's rights were practically non-existent seems to emphasize the fact that their choice was based on comfort and self-realization rather than practicality. Basically, what I'm saying is that for whatever reason, Dion felt compelled to live as a woman. And while we may never fully understand their motivations for doing so, we can still respect them and their place in history. Actually, that sounds like a pretty good rule for life in general. Happy belated Pride Month to everybody, and thanks for watching my video. If you want to find out more about any of these incredibly interesting people, then feel free to check out any of the sources listed in the credits. And I hope to see you all next time.